Boy, first of all, thank you, Neil, and I just want to welcome everyone here today. And before I get started with my speech, just give you a little background. Some know, some don't know. I spent 20 years of my life in the U.S. in our Chicago facility and in our New Jersey facility. I traveled to every single state, almost every single day. I'd wake up in the morning in a hotel room and a lot of you feel the same way. You wake up and you wonder, where are you for a second before it snaps in. But I just want to tell you, I love the U.S. I love the American people. I love the Canadian people. And I know Americans I speak to, and I know thousands of people, they say the same thing. They love Canada, and Canadians love America. So thank you for coming. It's such a real honor to be here today with so many business leaders from Canada and across the United States. Alongside, and I brought a couple of friends, I call them my champions, alongside Vic Fedeli, Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and he's instrumental in making sure that both sides of the border see economic development and thrive and prosper and grow. So, Vic, if you want to just stand up for a second and say hello. I call Vic my number one salesperson. I also brought along Stephen Lecce, a great Minister of Energy and Electrification, and he is moving that file forward like we've never seen. We're leaders in the nuclear sector with small modular reactors, and there's no one more we want to send energy to than our friends, our family members in the U.S., as you were saying, Neil, and I've been using that terminology, family members, for forever. So thank you, Stephen, and let's keep working on those SMRs and creating more opportunities for both sides of the border. I couldn't think of a better place to start our mission to Washington than the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And Neil, thank you so much for hosting us and having us by. Over the last few weeks and months, a lot has been said about the strength of the U.S.-Canada relationship. As you were saying, the two strongest allies and friends in the world, two treasured allies, and just standing shoulder to shoulder on so many crises that both our countries have faced over decades. Decades of economic growth through free trade, millions of jobs created on both sides of the border. Countless lives sacrificed in battle in defense of our common values. All of this is true. And it's so important to remember everything we've achieved together. But now, more than ever, we need to focus on the future. And we need to be clear, very clear-eyed, about the real risk we're facing right now, about the true trade war we're waging, which is, in my opinion, is totally unnecessary, which will hurt both countries dramatically. About our common economic enemy, and I'll tell you who our common economic enemy is. As the whole world is watching two closest friends about to wage an economic war against each other, the world is watching carefully. A lot of the world is saying, we're next. A lot of the world is sitting back and laughing. And I'll tell you who's sitting back and laughing is China. China's sitting back and thinking we couldn't ask for a better plan than this. Over the last few months, I've met and spoken with senators, congressmen and women, governors from every region of America and from both sides of the aisle. And I'll tell you what they say. They won't say it publicly. They say, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And no matter if it's Democrat or Republican, I have yet to hear one elected official down here and say, that's a great idea. Let's attack Canada economically. It's never been said. I've yet to meet one CEO, and I've talked to endless CEOs, say, let's go after Canada. Every single U.S. corporation, their headquarters, for the most part, not all, but a good chunk of them, probably 85%, they're located in Toronto or Ontario somewhere. And the supply chain is so integrated. In these conversations, I've promoted Ontario's close economic partnership with the United States, a relationship built on more than $365 billion in balanced two-way trade. I've never seen anything like it. It's literally split right down the center. Trade that benefits both equally. Ontario is America's third largest trading partner in the world. Just think, and I never recommend this, if Ontario was a standalone country, it would be your third largest trading partner in the world. As you were saying, Neil, we're the #1 export destination for 17 states and #2 to 11 others. When I'm on the media, I like saying customer. I'm a business guy. I'm not a politician. And I don't see eye to eye with politicians, but that's another whole story. And government drives me crazy. That's another whole story, but we'll chat another day. But that's what I look at it as, you're our largest customer, we're your largest customer. And each and every day, think of this, 9 million Americans wake up to go to work and earn a paycheck by making something that's sold to a customer in Ontario. So they're making products for people in Ontario. Now, what they don't say in this speech is 28 states around the U.S., their #1 customer is Canada. Ontario has 17 and 11 of #2. In my conversations with U.S. lawmakers, I've also heard serious concerns about China, about how China is ripping off American workers by flooding markets and hijacking global supply chains. America has had enough, American workers have had enough, and I've had enough. In response, U.S. lawmakers are leading the most ambitious economic realignment in the past 100 years. They're decoupling from China and its global proxies. Doing so will be no easy task. It will require long-term thinking. It will require dedication, and most of all, it will require friends and allies like Canada and Ontario, and I can tell you, Canada's here to help. Working together, Canada and the U.S. can be the richest, most successful, safest, most secure two countries on the entire planet when we're working together. We can usher in a new American-Canadian century, what President Trump calls new golden age. We do so by building Fortress Amcan. Fortress Amcan is a renewed alliance between America and Canada that's a beacon of stability, security, and long-term economic growth on both sides of the border. First, Fortress Amcan promotes free, fair, and balanced trade. Fair trade means fighting back against freeloaders that rip off workers by taking advantage of free trade agreements designed to protect jobs at home. I'm talking about China. Together, let's put an end to Chinese transshipments through Mexico into American and Canadian markets. Every member of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement needs to match or exceed U.S. tariffs on Chinese products. Electric vehicles, batteries, and in particular, aluminum and steel all need matching tariffs. If they fail to do so, they should lose their seat at the table. I always say, if you don't play fair in a deal, no matter if it's business or politics, you should excuse yourself from the table. And let's protect against Chinese investment and ownership in strategically important sectors, such as critical minerals and energy. Canada and the United States and Mexico all need strong, robust investment review processes designed to block Chinese investments aimed at undermining our economies. Second, let's grow the Amcan economy for Amcan workers. Fortress Amcan needs to take action to reshore supply chains, attract investments, and bring good jobs back home for workers on both sides of the border. We do so by streamlining regulations to promote economic integration and by eliminating anti-worker, anti-business taxes. You know, folks, I can tell you, I've been in office for 7 years. I don't believe in taxes. Government doesn't have an income problem, they have a spending problem. We have never, ever raised taxes from the day we've been in office. Matter of fact, through great leadership of my friends sitting in the front row, we reduced the cost of doing business in Ontario by $8 billion each and every single year. Well, I can see there's some Ontario folks in here too clapping because they're getting the benefits of that $8 billion, including by scrapping Canada's digital service tax and the Canadian carbon tax. Those are two terrible taxes, by the way. Third, we need to accelerate strategic resource development. I'm calling for a new Amcan Critical Mineral Security Alliance, an alliance that invests and builds out American and Canadian critical mineral supply chains, so we're less dependent on China, on Russia, and other countries that don't share our democratic values. As we do, we need to speed up regulatory approvals. Fortress Amcan will designate areas where multiple critical minerals are present or likely to be present, including the Ring of Fire region in Ontario, the largest critical mineral deposit in the entire world. As regions of strategic importance to the national security of Canada and the United States, these regions will be supported with a special approvals process that cuts down timelines to get minerals out of the ground, processed, and shipped to factory floors. The same kind of necessary regulatory reform being led by the Trump administration. Fourth, we'll achieve Amcan energy security to power Amcan economic growth. Fortress Amcan should be powered by Amcan energy of every type, energy that is produced, consumed, and creates jobs in every single region in both countries. I want to further integrate our energy and electricity grids. People don't realize, as we stand right here, right now, we can deliver from Ontario electricity as far south as Florida. In just a moment's notice, we can flick on the switch or flick off the switch. I prefer flicking on all the switches, and encourage more exports of Canadian energy and electricity to the U.S. to power your economic growth. Fifth, Fortress Amcan will protect Amcan land, air, Arctic, water, and communities. Canada needs to demonstrate that we take our shared security seriously. It's not only what President Trump has asked, it's the right thing to do. It's why Ontario launched Operation Deterrence, working with fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, drones, off-road vehicles, boats, and foot patrol. Over 200 dedicated officers have already conducted 10,000 hours of focused patrol to detect, disrupt, and deter illegal cross-border activity. Operation Deterrence has already led to hundreds of charges against illegal border crossers, against people smuggling illegal drugs, stolen vehicles, and illegal firearms across the border. But when it comes down to it, we need to do more. I'm urging Canada's federal government to pass strict new mandatory minimum sentences and other reforms so any thug convicted of trafficking fentanyl or illegal drugs get thrown in jail for good. That's it. They're gone, they're done. Ontario and the federal government will also work together to get at the root cause of drug smuggling. We'll audit any bank, credit union, or financial institution suspected of financing gangs or cartels. And finally, we will keep pushing our federal government to do its part by exceeding Canada's 2% NATO defense spending commitment. Friends, this is Fortress Amcan. This is a way forward. It's a vision that respects each country as proudly independent, and it celebrates what we can achieve together. Let's stop wasting time and energy and effort fighting each other, threatening tariffs that will only hurt workers, hurt businesses, and cost more for families, hurting hard-working people just looking to get ahead in life. Instead, let's focus on restoring the pride of Made in the USA and Made in Canada. Let's be unapologetic as we stand up for American and Canadian workers. Today, let's usher in the new American and Canadian century, a new golden age. Let's build Fortress Amcan. Thank you, and may God bless the people of America, and may God bless the people of Canada. Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Your enthusiasm is contagious. I think we're all ready to stand up for the bilateral relationship, and I really appreciate you taking the time to follow up on that really, I think, terrific set of remarks with kind of delving a little bit deeper on the strategy. I really appreciated how you raised, one thing you raised, I think very appropriately, is that there are synergies with the Trump administration in areas like regulatory reform. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about some of the reforms you envision that can complement the strategy. And you and I were talking off stage. One of the ones that we're really focused on in this country is permitting reform.
Yes.
We are wretched in this country. Permitting reform. The stat we always use is it takes twice as long to permit a project as it does to build it across infrastructure. So talk to us about that part of your vision too, in terms of how regulatory reform in general can complement this very innovative strategy.
Well, first of all, thank you, Neil. And red tape and regulations, they drive me crazy. We've cut over $1 billion of red tape and regulations in Ontario, but let me point out two that would really help the U.S. and Canada. One, making sure that when we're shipping 4.4 million barrels or 1.2 billion barrels a year to support the energy needs of our allies and friends south of the border, what we should be doing is building that Keystone pipeline going south. I always say we need 4 pipelines, going north, going south, going east, and going west. And we don't have to rely on anyone else. We don't have to be going down to Venezuela or wherever to get your energy. We have it right here. We can be self-sufficient between the two countries, but not just self-sufficient. We can sell that oil around the world rather than depending on countries that don't even like us selling us the oil. So we need to focus on that. Critical minerals. I'm not too sure if any of the folks in this room have heard of the Ring of Fire. It's the largest critical mineral deposit in the world, has every type of critical mineral there is. Well, the regulations have been working on this for 30 years. It's unacceptable. We believe in working collaboratively and cooperatively with our First Nations community, which we have. They're on board. But when you're trying to drill a test hole, and these drills are only 4.5 inches in diameter, and they give you every bit of regulation why you can't drill that hole. Well, things are going to change. Yes, do I call this an economic crisis we're at the peak of? But every crisis, as we know, there's opportunities. There's opportunities to get critical minerals out of the ground, get them processed, and get them into the factory floors right across the US and Canada. And when China, everyone sees China, they cut the US off of critical minerals for any of their weapons or manufacturing, because they don't want you to compete. They don't want you to be a military powerhouse, which US is already, as they're trying to catch up. Who has those critical minerals? Canada has those critical minerals. And if you look at our high-grade nickel as well, there's nickel coming from, I don't know, Indonesia, maybe Australia, but it's low-grade nickel. And 50% of the high-grade nickel that the U.S. wants and needs comes from Ontario. And I want to ship you more high-grade nickel. I keep saying high-grade. That is absolutely critical. Excuse the pun, but it's critical. The high-grade nickel. And the list keeps going on and on and on. We have one of the largest trade shows in the world on critical minerals. I think it's in March, the beginning of March. I encourage you to come up. And people from all over the world are coming to Ontario for the minerals show, the mining show, I should say.
Terrific. I think that I'm really glad you raised this issue in the context of China, too.
Yes.
You said it very well in your remarks, but you also know that there are very few topics that are bipartisan in Washington these days. China is certainly one of them. We've done a fair bit of talking here. You took some action in the province in terms on Chinese procurement.
That's right.
And issuing some restrictions. Talk to us a little bit about that in some detail.
Well, we're just very simple. We're banning China from any investments in critical minerals. They'll use those critical minerals to come back and haunt us one day in Canada and the U.S. Who do we want to give them to? Closest friends and allies, the U.S. And we need to make sure that we start speeding up, just like President Trump said. Let's speed up the process. It just goes on and on and on. Well, things are going to change. I think both countries need to change. We need to get shovels in the ground, critical minerals out and into the factory floors.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. That should be all of our goals jointly. You hit on another, I think, really important topic in your remarks for the U.S. business community. Mm-hmm. We're going to get past, I'm confident, we're going to get past this stage of tariff threats and threatened tariff war. The next stage, is which could come in very quick sequence, will be the Kuzma review.
Yes.
A huge challenge that we at the Chamber have been certainly illustrating for now the last 2 years plus is the lack of compliance and enforcement from all three governments. Each one of them, the automotive sector that's critical to the province, the U.S., there was a decision in Canada's and in Mexico's favor that's more than a year and a half old, that the dispute resolution panel ruled in Canada and Mexico's favor against the U.S., and the U.S. has still not implemented that ruling. That's an example of something that the U.S. has to comply with. You raised the DST, the Digital Services Tax. Another issue for us in the private sector is C11, online streaming bill. Tell me a little bit more about sort of how you're approaching those kind of discriminatory measures from the province. I appreciated your strong statement and why you think they're impediments also to our shared prosperity and shared progress.
Well, we have unnecessary taxes, the DST. Every Republican, every Democrat agrees. We shouldn't have that tax. We shouldn't have a federal carbon tax that makes us uncompetitive around the world, that just adds cost onto the goods that we manufacture across the board. Let's cut the regulations. Let's get things moving. We know China, there's no regulations there. They get a phone call and say, start digging, and that's it. And that's what happens. And manufacturing, they can build a city of 1 million people in 3-4 years. Yeah. It just goes up. So I just can't emphasize enough that with the USMCA deal, we have to come together, and whoever doesn't want to play at the table fairly, then they leave the table, and then we move on. But I think it's so important that we have 3 great countries, and we move together, because if you put everything aside, it's us against the world. I'll tell you that right now. When all heck breaks loose, and hopefully that will never happen, well, who do you turn to? You turn to your family members. And I'm going to give you a little story, and this has nothing to do with the USMCA, but we've had the threats of tariffs go, and when that hurricane hit North Carolina and Florida, without asking, we sent endless amount of, we call them hydro linemen, electricity linemen. They loaded up their trucks, they headed down there. And then the California fires. And sure enough, the tariffs were peaking a little bit. We put a call out in Ontario to urban firefighters. We had more urban firefighters ready to suit up. We had to cap it at 300, ready to hop on the plane, put their lives in danger to protect our family members. We had water bombers already stationed. We flew them out to BC to fly down there. Unfortunately, the story goes, they said they didn't have the water for the water bombers. But my point here is, when a family member needs help, you put everything else aside and you go help them. Because I know Americans would do the same for Canada.
It should have been in my open, because as a native Californian, we're grateful. We are grateful. As a Southern Californian, I say that. And that it really is the case. And that was obviously the case in obviously the terrible Canadian wildfires of 2 summers ago, right? I mean, we all, you're right. Family comes to each other's side. That's exactly right. And in times of need. It's very well said. And you very correctly hit on the other bipartisan issue in Washington, besides China, which is the DST. You're absolutely right. Yes. And discriminatory taxes. So thank you for that.
It's terrible.
So I want to, and maybe we'll make this the final question, because I want to be very cognizant of your time. Obviously, the announcement yesterday, 25% tariffs imposed as of March 4th on aluminum and steel on all of our trade partners, including our closest allies. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I have to be honest, I was disappointed. President Trump said, hey, you have 30 days, let's work it out. And bingo, a couple days later, he wakes up and the rules changed, the goalposts changed. I'm thinking, I'm a type of person, when you give someone your word and you shake their hand, not that I shook the president's hand, but when you shake their hand, it's golden. You do not move from those rules. So let's talk about aluminum and steel. Yes, we ship a boatload of aluminum, especially from Quebec, because the U.S. needs it. That's the reason we ship it down there. And then they do amazing thing. This is what the supply chain does, and it's so important so we ship the aluminum down, and no matter if it's beverage companies, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, that aluminum goes down, the cans are printed, and they added value. And those same cans get shipped back up to Ontario or wherever they're filling. They get filled. That's the same as our 2 largest breweries, Molson's and Labatt's. They ship the aluminum down, they print those cans, and this is totaling close to $1 billion. And then you add more value. The big soup company, I'm not going to mention them, world famous soup company out in New Jersey. They put added value. They take the aluminum, they make the cans, they put the label on, they put that great soup, because I love that soup, and they ship all that soup all the way, across Canada. So it's added value. So when you tariff the aluminum, all it's going to do is it's a tax on the people. It's going to be a tax on the American people, because everything is going to go up that's made from aluminum. And that's the same as steel. The auto sector, we buy as many cars as we ship down. And the cars that are made contain 50% American parts. And Rob knows, Rob's an absolute champion, a true leader. And, and steel, that the cars are made, a lot of steel comes from the US to make some of the cars in Canada that get shipped down. And, when it comes to supply chain, as one of my friends told me before we came in here, you can't unscramble the egg, you got to make a larger omelet. That's right. Because you just can't, after 1960s, I got to give David, or our friend, that credit, but you just can't flick a switch in the auto sector that's had the auto pack since 1960s. As you've all heard, auto parts go back and forth across the border up to 7, 8 times. And then it gets assembled either in Michigan or another auto plant or up in Ontario. That's the way it works, and it works well, and everyone benefits. And all my point today, Neil, is let's grow a stronger, more resilient, prosperous, the two greatest countries in the world. Let's work together and protect ourselves from the likes of China or the likes of Russia. You know, they do not like us. I'll call a spade a spade. They want to hurt America and in return hurt their family member, Canada. But together, we are unstoppable. But Neil, I just want to thank you again. I want to thank all the folks here. And if you're ever up in Toronto, please give me a call on my cell phone. And I give it out publicly. So by all means, just go online. Doug Ford's cell number will pop up. Text me. Yeah, honestly, that's the way it works. I'm not joking. I get 1,000 messages a day. But I'll guarantee you one thing, you're getting a call back. It might be a day later, but again, I just want to emphasize two greatest countries in the world. I love the United States. I've said it earlier, I'll say it again. I love Americans. I spent 20 years of my life down here, and you can't ask for two greater nations in the world. Let's stick together, and please get the message to President Trump. This is not a good idea for both countries. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you for having me.